I thought my daughter perished in the war. Until I found her in the hands of an enemy soldier, the war had taken everything. Cities once filled with life and laughter were now nothing more than jagged ruins, blackened by fire and scarred by laser blasts. Smoke rose in thin, gray columns from the remains of homes, factories, and parks that had once been familiar to the people who had lived there. Among the wreckage, the survivors moved cautiously, their eyes alert for danger that could appear without warning. Commander Elias Ward walked through the streets of what had once been his home, each step heavy with the memory of everything he had lost. Elias had been a soldier all his life, trained to fight, to survive, and to protect. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this. The Zalker, an alien species with advanced technology and ruthless tactics, had arrived without warning. Entire colonies had fallen within hours. Humans had fought with courage, but their weapons were primitive against the aliens, energy shields, and plasma cannons. And then there was the personal loss. Elias had only one daughter, Leela, and she had been caught in the first wave of the attack. He had watched helplessly as their home was destroyed, debris consuming everything. He had searched for her among the chaos, screaming her name into smoke-filled streets, only to find nothing. For weeks, he had clung to hope that she had survived, but each day had brought more despair. Eventually, the hope had faded, replaced by a gnawing emptiness that no battle or medal could ever fill. Now, months after that terrible day, Elias led a small team of scouts through the ruins of the city. His team was small, barely more than a handful of humans who had survived by luck and skill, but they were determined. They moved silently, scanning each ruined building for signs of life or alien activity. Every shadow could hide a Zalker patrol or a trap, and every sound could signal danger. As they passed through the remains of a collapsed building, Elias' sharp eyes caught a glimmer of metal. He crouched to examine it and found a small pendant half buried in dust and ash. It was delicate silver with a tiny engraving that made his heart stop. It was hers, his daughter's. He held the pendant in his hand, staring at it as memories flooded back. He remembered Leela as she had been, a bright, curious girl with a laugh that could fill a room and a mind that never stopped asking questions. He remembered how she used to follow him around during drills, pretending to be a soldier herself, always eager to learn. And he remembered the last time he had held her, the fear in her eyes as their home burned around them. For a long moment, Elias didn't speak. He simply stood there, the pendant clutched tightly, letting the memory of her presence fill him with both sorrow and determination. He would find her, he had to. He rose, his resolve firming like steel. "We move forward," he said to his team. "We find survivors, we find her." The team nodded, understanding the urgency and the personal stakes driving their leader. They moved with renewed purpose, navigating the ruined streets, using the cover of collapsed buildings to avoid detection. Their path took them toward the outskirts of the city, where the signs of Zalker occupation grew stronger. Smoke from active energy plants and patrol drones hovering above the streets warned of nearby enemy forces. As they approached a partially intact structure, Elias paused. He could hear the faint hum of alien machinery inside. He gestured for the team to stay low. With practiced precision, he led them around the building, looking for a safer entry point. Through a broken wall, he caught sight of movement inside, something that made his heart race and his mind sharpen. Inside, humans were being herded, their faces pale with fear, their hands bound. Some were injured, limping, or supported by companions. The aliens moved among them, their movements precise and mechanical. Even at a distance, Elias could see the difference between them and humans. The Zalker were taller, with elongated limbs and eyes that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Their skin shimmered with a strange metallic sheen, and their voices were a series of clicks and hums, incomprehensible but chilling. Elias studied the scene carefully, trying to determine the best course of action. He had faced impossible odds before, but this was different. Direct combat would be deadly. The humans were surrounded, and the Zalker's weapons could cut through metal like paper. But he had to find a way in to gather information and, if possible, to reach Leela. He scanned the captives for any sign of her. The chances were slim, there were dozens of prisoners, but his eyes were trained to notice details. And then he saw it, a subtle glint at the corner of a figure's sleeve. A piece of jewelry worn just as she would wear it. He froze, his pulse quickening. Could it be? Could it really be her? Elias signaled to his team, pointing subtly toward the figure. They crouched lower, moving as silently as possible, careful not to alert the aliens. He studied her posture, the tilt of her head, the way she carried herself. There was something familiar in the way she moved, a grace and intelligence that no captivity could erase. His heart ached with hope and fear all at once. He whispered under his breath, "Leela." There was no response. Of course there was. She had no way to know he was here. He would have to get closer, but approaching meant risk. The Zalker were vigilant, and any misstep could endanger not only him but also the humans. Elias took a deep breath, centering himself. He had faced impossible odds before and survived. He had led troops through battles where hope seemed lost. Now hope was not just a strategy, it was a necessity. His daughter's life depended on it. He began to plan. He needed a distraction, something that would draw the Zalker away long enough to slip inside. He scanned the building for anything that could help. Then he saw it, a panel of wires leading to the energy control system. If he could create a small overload, the ensuing chaos might give him the window he needed. Elias crouched near the panel, working quickly. Sparks flew as he manipulated the wires, his hands steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. The lights flickered, and a low hum grew into a sharp crackle. Alarms blared, and the Zalker guards immediately began scanning for the source of the disturbance. The moment had come. Elias signaled to his team, and they moved silently, slipping through shadows toward the captives. The humans were confused, some frightened by the sudden chaos, but Elias kept his focus on the figure he hoped was Leela. As they drew closer, he could see her face more clearly. She had grown, older than the child he remembered, but the same eyes, the same determination. She had survived. Against all odds, she had survived, but the danger was far from over. The Zalker were regrouping, and their attention would soon return to the prisoners. Elias needed a plan not just to reach her, but to extract her from this fortress without getting caught. He crouched behind a wall, whispering to his team, "We cannot fight them head-on. We need to move with stealth, precision, and speed. Once we reach her, we keep moving. No hesitation, understand?" They nodded. There was no room for error. Every human life counted, but this one mattered more than anything. As they began to maneuver through the building, Elias couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and hope. Fear for what could happen, hope for what might. His mind raced with possibilities, strategies, and contingencies. Every step brought him closer to his daughter, closer to a chance at redemption for himself and survival for her. He thought about the world they had lost, the colonies burned, the families shattered. But he also thought about the resilience of humans, the spark that refused to be extinguished even in the face of overwhelming power. That spark lived in Leela. He could see it, he could feel it, and he would not let it die. As the team crept through the corridors, the sounds of the Zalker and the chaos they had caused surrounded them. The humans in captivity looked on in confusion and hope, sensing that something was about to change. And then Elias saw it again, a momentary glance from Leela toward him, as if she sensed a presence she could not yet name. His heart clenched. That single glance confirmed what he had hoped, what he had prayed for. She was alive, she was human. And he would bring her home, no matter what it took. Outside, the ruined city seemed silent, but the war was far from over. Inside the fortress, human courage was about to be tested in ways that would shape the course of their survival. And for Commander Elias Ward, the war had just become personal. The pendant in his hand weighed heavy, but it was more than metal. It was a promise. A promise that he would not fail, a promise that humanity's spirit would not be broken, and a promise that a father would fight to reclaim his daughter from the hands of an enemy that underestimated the strength of the human heart. Every step forward was a step into danger, but also a step toward hope. And in that hope, Elias found the strength to move, to plan, and to believe that one day soon he would hold Leela in his arms again, and the war would not have taken everything after all. Elias crouched in the shadow of a collapsed wall, his eyes never leaving the figure he prayed. Was his daughter? The glow from the Zalker machinery cast eerie reflections on the smooth metallic surfaces inside the fortress, highlighting the harsh difference between human frailty and alien precision. He knew that any sudden move could alert the enemy, and yet every moment he waited was agony. He signaled to his team to spread out silently, keeping low and using the broken walls and rubble for cover. Every human life counted, but for Elias, there was only one that mattered most. He had to reach her. He had to make sure she was still the daughter he had lost all those months ago. The alien prisoners were corralled in a large chamber. Their eyes reflected fear, confusion, and in some cases, despair. Some were injured, limping, or dragging the weight of captivity. Elias' heart ached at the sight, but he forced himself to focus. There would be time to grieve later. Now was the time to act. The Zalker were moving among the prisoners, their movements precise and deliberate. Elias observed their patterns, noting the way they rarely turned their heads fully, relying instead on enhanced peripheral vision. Their weapons hummed quietly, deadly even without being fired. Any confrontation here would be suicidal, and he could not risk it. He crouched lower, taking a deep breath. He needed to understand more before attempting a rescue. His team had brought a few small hacking devices, primitive by Zalker standards but clever in human hands. Elias had to decide: create a distraction, attempt to hack the security systems, or try to reach his daughter stealthily. He could not do all three at once, and each choice carried risk. Finally, he made his decision. Stealth was paramount. He would use the distraction only as a backup. The key was to reach her, make contact, and gather information. He studied the guards' movements, timing their shifts and identifying blind spots. One corner of the room had a shadowed passageway, narrow but potentially safe. If they could slip through, Elias might have a chance to communicate with Leela without the Zalker noticing. He moved first, signaling to his team to follow silently. Each step was deliberate, careful not to disturb the dust or debris underfoot. The prisoners seemed unaware of their presence, huddled together under alien supervision. Elias could feel his pulse racing, but he forced his breathing steady. He had trained for tense situations, and now that training was essential. As they reached the shadowed passage, Elias caught a glimpse of Leela. She was taller now, older than he remembered, but her eyes, sharp, intelligent, unyielding, were unmistakable. She moved with caution, obeying the Zalker without fear, her head held high even in captivity. His heart clenched. She was alive, yes, but the Zalker had tried to shape her to make her their tool. He could see the subtle signs of their influence, the way she flinched at sudden movements, the way she obeyed without question. Elias whispered to his team, "We move slowly. Any mistake and we lose her." They nodded. Even among seasoned soldiers there was tension, but all understood that this was no ordinary mission. This was personal. They edged forward, using every shadow and every obstruction to conceal themselves. The air inside the fortress was cold and metallic, carrying the faint hum of alien machinery. Elias' mind raced with possibilities. How had she survived all this time? How had she endured the cruelty and isolation of captivity? And most importantly, how could he restore her to the daughter he had lost without frightening her or making her feel betrayed? Finally, they reached a vantage point near where Leela stood. Elias could see her clearly now. Her eyes flickered with recognition, though she did not yet know why. He had to make contact without alarming the Zalker. He scanned the room for anything they could use, an object, a reflection, a shadow, to signal her. There in a corner, a broken panel reflected light in a narrow beam. Elias gestured subtly toward it, moving his fingers in a pattern they had used before, a silent signal for father. "Safe. Wait." Leela's eyes followed the movement, and for a moment something changed. A flicker of understanding passed between them, recognition, hope. But before he could advance further, a Zalker guard turned sharply, its glowing eyes scanning the shadows. Elias froze, his body tense, heart pounding. The guard's gaze passed mere inches from him, and then it moved on. He exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain slightly. One close call, he thought. One more, and we could fail. He whispered to his team, "We need to gather more information. Find weak points, security gaps, anything we can use. We can't rush this." The team spread out, observing and recording. They noted patrol timings, machinery cycles, and structural weaknesses. Elias studied the humans, noting their resilience and small acts of defiance, the whispered encouragements, the subtle gestures of solidarity. Despite the fear and exhaustion, the human spirit endured. That resilience gave him hope. Hours passed. Elias did not move from his vantage point. He waited, observing, planning, calculating. Leela remained in sight, occasionally glancing around, cautious, aware of the dangers, but still alert and alive. Every detail he noted would matter when the time came to act. Finally, he signaled to one of his team members to retrieve a small hacking device. They approached a nearby terminal, their movements careful and precise. The device interfaced with the Zalker technology, feeding it a stream of human-engineered code. Lights flickered on the panel, alarms paused briefly, and sensors appeared to glitch. It was a small victory, but it meant they had a chance to manipulate the environment for a short window. Elias knew that when the opportunity came, they had to act quickly. He could not hesitate. He could not allow fear to control him. His daughter's life and the lives of the other prisoners depended on him. He took a moment to observe Leela again. She was standing tall despite the circumstances, her posture hinting at strength that had not been broken. She was more than a child now. She had endured, adapted, and survived. Elias felt a surge of pride mixed with sorrow. She had grown through suffering, yet she remained fundamentally human. He whispered again, "Leela, I'm here. I'll get you out." The hours of waiting paid off. A patrol of Zalker guards moved past their hiding spot, distracted by the flashing alarms and the minor malfunctions caused by the hacking device. Elias seized the moment, moving a few steps closer, careful to stay in shadow. His eyes never left Leela, noting every twitch, every subtle motion. He reached a point where he could communicate with her more clearly. He tapped on a reflective surface near her, signaling a simple pattern they had used when she was younger. A dot, a dash, a pause. It meant nothing to the Zalker, but to her it was a message. "Father, safe, wait." Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment her face softened. Recognition, relief, hope. She did not move toward him, not yet, but the spark was there. She remembered, she understood. And that was enough for now. Elias retreated slightly, signaling to his team to maintain their positions. They could not risk exposure, not until they had a full plan. But the knowledge that Leela was alive, aware, and responsive gave them the strength to continue. As night fell, the fortress quieted slightly. The Zalker did not rest, but the lull in activity allowed Elias to review the information his team had gathered. Security patterns, weak points, machinery schedules, all would be crucial for the next stage. They had a window, and they had to use it wisely. He looked at Leela one last time before withdrawing to a safer location. The glow of the alien lights reflected in her eyes, but beneath it, he could see the girl he had known, the child he had lost, and the resilient human she had become. She had endured the impossible. She had survived, and he would not fail her. Back with his team, Elias began to outline a plan. They would need stealth, speed, and coordination. They would need to use human ingenuity against alien technology, and above all, they would need courage, the courage to act when the stakes were higher than they had ever been. "We have what we need," he said quietly. "Tomorrow we move, we get her out, we bring her home." His team nodded, understanding the gravity of the task ahead. No one spoke of fear or doubt. There was no time for it. They had a mission, a purpose, and a life to save. Elias took a deep breath and allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He thought about the world before the war, the life he had known, and the daughter he had thought lost forever. And he thought about the resilience of humans, their ability to endure, to adapt, and to fight even when the odds seemed insurmountable. That resilience was what he was counting on now. Outside, the war continued, indifferent to individual lives. Inside the fortress, human courage was about to be tested in a way it had never been before. And Elias Ward, father and soldier, prepared himself for the moment that could reunite him with the most important person in his life. No matter the danger, no matter the cost. He would not fail. Elias had never felt a moment so tense in his life. The hours spent observing the Zalker fortress had brought him closer to his daughter, yet the danger was greater than he had ever imagined. Every second mattered. Every misstep could cost lives. He crouched with his team in the shadowed corridor, reviewing the information they had gathered. The patterns were clear now. The Zalker rotated their patrols every 20 minutes, leaving brief gaps where human movements could go unnoticed. The air was thick with the hum of alien machinery, and the faint scent of ozone from their energy weapons lingered in the vents. He turned to his team and spoke quietly. "We can't go in blindly. Leela's here, but we cannot risk alarming the Zalker. If we fail, she's lost to us forever." His team nodded. Each member was experienced, but even the bravest soldiers could feel fear when the stakes were this high. They had survived battles before, but never one where the personal and the strategic were so entwined. Elias reviewed the options. They could attempt a full assault, but the Zalker had superior weapons, and direct confrontation would be deadly. They could try to hack deeper into the security system, but time was short, and their devices were crude against advanced alien technology. The only viable path was stealth, patience, and human ingenuity. He took a deep breath and began a detailed plan. The first step was to make subtle diversions to draw guards away from key positions. His team would use small devices to create controlled disruptions. Flickering lights, short bursts of sound, minor glitches in machinery, all carefully calculated to avoid full-scale alarms. While the Zalker investigated these anomalies, Elias would move closer to Leela. He thought about the girl he had lost. Memories flooded his mind. Her laughter echoing through the halls of their home, her endless questions about the stars, the way she had once tried to imitate his combat drills with a wooden stick, pretending to be a soldier. Those memories were a lifeline now, a source of hope that he clung to amidst the fear and uncertainty. The team set to work. Small devices were placed carefully in vents and panels, their timers synchronized for simultaneous activation. Elias moved silently, watching as the first flickers of light drew alien attention away from the prisoners. The guards paused, scanning the hallways, their glowing eyes searching for threats that did not exist. For a few precious minutes, the path to Leela was clear. Elias moved forward, each step deliberate. His eyes never left her figure. She was standing tall, calm despite the circumstances. He could see the faintest hints of the conditioning the Zalker had imposed, the way she followed orders, the slight tension in her posture. But he also saw resilience. She had survived, and she had maintained her humanity. He gestured subtly, signaling for her to stay still. She responded with the faintest nod, her eyes wide but steady. That small gesture was enough. Elias' heart swelled with a mixture of relief and determination. He was close, closer than he had dared hope, but the hardest part was yet to come. They moved through the shadows, slipping past patrols, using debris and machinery as cover. Every sense was on high alert. The slightest sound, a shift of rubble, the hum of a vent, a click of alien armor, could expose them. Elias' mind raced, calculating every move, every possibility. He knew the Zalker were adaptive, intelligent, and dangerous, but he also knew that human ingenuity had a power they often underestimated. Finally, they reached a narrow passage leading to a holding area where the prisoners were confined. Elias crouched behind a wall, observing the guards and the prisoners. Leela's eyes met his again. She recognized him, truly recognized him, and a flicker of hope passed between them. He whispered under his breath, "Hold on, Leela, I'm coming for you." The next phase required precision. Elias signaled to his team to create a minor distraction near the far end of the corridor. A small device sparked, sending a faint alarm and causing the nearest guards to investigate. With their attention diverted, Elias slipped into the holding area. His eyes scanned the prisoners, noting their condition, their fear, and their hope. Among them, Leela stood apart, not because of obedience, but because of her presence. She radiated resilience, a quiet defiance that could not be extinguished. He reached out, careful not to touch her, signaling with hand movements they had used before. She understood immediately. Recognition, relief, and determination crossed her face. Elias' heart clenched. She was alive, aware, and ready to fight back if needed. But the moment of reunion was brief. One of the Zalker guards turned sharply, its glowing eyes scanning the room. Elias froze. He had only seconds to act. Using a small device from his belt, he created a burst of light and sound in the opposite corner, drawing the guard's attention away. The alien turned, confused, giving Elias and Leela the window they needed. He moved quickly, taking her hand. She did not resist, but there was still caution in her movements. She had been trained, conditioned, and her trust was not given lightly. Elias squeezed her hand gently, signaling reassurance. "It's me, Leela. We're getting out of here." She nodded, understanding, and together they began moving toward the exit. The team covered them, using shadows and timing to avoid patrols. Each step was calculated, each movement deliberate. The fortress was a maze of metal corridors, but Elias had memorized the layout from observation. He led them confidently, despite the tension gnawing at his nerves. As they moved, Leela began to speak quietly, recounting what she had seen, what the Zalker had done, and how she had survived. Her voice was calm, measured, but beneath it was a strength that impressed Elias. She had endured unimaginable hardships, yet she remained herself. He felt a surge of pride mixed with sorrow. She had grown through suffering, but she had not been broken. The corridors grew narrower, the patrols more frequent, and the risk of detection increased. Elias signaled for the team to slow, to wait for the right moment. Timing was everything. One misstep, one miscalculation, and the mission would fail. Suddenly, a guard turned the corner. Elias froze, pulling Leela behind a bulkhead. The alien scanned the corridor, its glowing eyes moving with mechanical precision. The seconds stretched like hours. Then, satisfied that the disturbance was elsewhere, the guard moved on. Elias exhaled silently, relief washing over him. Leela squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement of the danger they had narrowly avoided. They pressed on, reaching the central security hub. Here, the Zalker monitored all activity, and any mistake could trigger a full alarm. Elias studied the layout. There was a chance to disable the surveillance systems, creating a path for the prisoners to escape, but it would require skill and quick thinking. He whispered instructions to his team. Two would create a diversion, drawing guards away from the hub. One would assist in disabling the systems, and Elias would lead Leela through the path they opened. The plan was risky, but it was the best chance they had. The diversion began. Lights flickered, machinery hummed strangely, and the guards moved cautiously, investigating the anomalies. Elias and his team acted quickly, disabling security cameras and opening the doors to the corridor that led to the exit. Every second counted. Leela followed Elias closely, her movements precise and careful. She had been trained to survive, but now she was learning to trust him again, to follow his lead despite the fear that lingered in her mind. Elias kept his focus, guiding her, protecting her, and planning their next moves. As they neared the exit, the tension reached its peak. Guards were returning to their positions, and the window for escape was closing. Elias signaled to his team, urging them forward. They moved swiftly, silently, until they reached the outer doors. Beyond them lay the open corridors of the fortress, and with them the chance of freedom. But freedom was not guaranteed. The final challenge awaited. The commander of the Zalker forces had been alerted to minor disturbances and was moving to investigate. Elias knew that confronting the commander directly would be dangerous, but avoiding detection entirely was nearly impossible. They would need every ounce of skill, courage, and ingenuity to succeed. He looked at Leela, seeing the determination in her eyes. She was no longer the child he had lost. She was a survivor, a human who had endured hardship and emerged stronger. Together they could face whatever came next. Elias whispered, "Almost there, Leela. Stay close, trust me, and we'll get out." She nodded, her hand tightening around his. The path ahead was uncertain, but their resolve was unbreakable. Every step was a test of courage, every moment a challenge to their skill and wits. And Elias knew, deep in his heart, that no matter what the Zalker threw at them, humanity's spirit, embodied in Leela and in themselves, could not be defeated. They moved forward, ready to face the final obstacles, ready to reclaim freedom, ready to prove that human ingenuity and courage could overcome even the most advanced and ruthless alien forces. The fortress was quiet now, but the silence was tense, like the air before a storm. Elias crouched with his team, signaling for Leela to stay close. Every sound echoed through the metallic corridors, every shadow held potential danger. They had made it past the initial security layers, but the hardest part was yet to come, leading the prisoners to safety. Leela's eyes were sharp, alert. She had observed the Zalker for months and knew their patterns better than anyone else. She whispered instructions to the other prisoners, guiding them with subtle gestures and hushed words. Her confidence and decisiveness surprised Elias. She was no longer the frightened girl he had once known. She had grown into a leader, shaped by the trials she had endured. Elias felt a surge of pride, but there was no time to linger. The Zalker would soon realize something was wrong. The team moved carefully, guiding the prisoners through side passages and shadowed corridors. Elias stayed close to Leela, keeping an eye on her and the other humans. Every step required attention. Every misstep could alert the aliens. As they turned a corner, they encountered a patrol. 3 Zalker soldiers moved methodically, their glowing eyes scanning for movement. Elias signaled for the group to freeze. He and Leela ducked behind a metal pillar, holding their breath. The aliens passed mere inches away, unaware of their presence. Once the patrol moved on, Elias led the group forward, deeper into the fortress. They reached a section filled with machinery humming quietly. Sparks flew from exposed wires, and pipes leaked small amounts of gas. Elias examined the area, looking for opportunities. He realized they could use the environment to their advantage. By manipulating the machinery, they could create distractions and block passages, slowing the aliens' response. He whispered his plan to the team. Two members would trigger the machinery to create noise and confusion, while the rest would lead the prisoners through a safe path. Timing was critical. Leela listened carefully, understanding every detail. She nodded and helped organize the prisoners, ensuring that everyone stayed low and moved quietly. The team executed the plan with precision. Sparks and smoke erupted from the machinery, drawing alien guards toward the source of the disturbance. Meanwhile, Elias and Leela guided the prisoners through a narrow passage that led toward the outer sections of the fortress. The sound of alarms began to rise, but the path they had chosen kept them just ahead of the Zalker forces. As they moved, Elias noticed how the prisoners adapted. Some had been weakened by captivity, but many showed resilience and courage. They followed Leela's instructions and moved with surprising coordination. The human spirit, even under extreme pressure, refused to be crushed. Elias felt hope bloom within him. They were not just surviving, they were fighting back with intelligence and determination. They reached a security door leading to the outer compound. Elias examined the locking mechanism. It was advanced, alien technology, but not infallible. Using a small device, he hacked the lock, bypassing the system with a careful combination of patience and ingenuity. The door hissed open, revealing a corridor bathed in dim emergency lights. The exit was close. Freedom was within reach. Suddenly, a new patrol appeared, faster and more alert than the previous ones. Elias froze, calculating. There was no time to retreat. He whispered quickly to Leela, signaling for her to take charge. Without hesitation, she moved to the front of the group, guiding the prisoners into a hidden alcove. Her confidence gave them courage. The humans followed silently, holding their breaths as the Zalker soldiers swept past. Once the patrol passed, Elias led the group forward again. The fortress layout was complex, but Leela's memory of its interior, combined with his tactical knowledge, created a perfect synergy. They moved quickly, avoiding main corridors and using maintenance shafts and service tunnels. Every turn brought new dangers: collapsed floors, exposed wiring, and the ever-present threat of alien patrols. But the humans adapted, moving as one, guided by determination and trust. At last, they reached the final challenge, a large open area that connected to the outer compound. The space was monitored by several Zalker guards and automated sentries. There was no cover. Elias studied the situation. They could not fight their way through. The only option was to create a distraction big enough to draw attention away from their escape route. He turned to Leela. "We need you to help. Can you lead the group while I handle the diversion?" She nodded without hesitation. "I can do it. Let's move quickly." Elias moved to the machinery at the edge of the open area. He manipulated controls, causing sparks and a brief explosion that drew the Zalker guards toward the disturbance. The automated sentries focused on the noise, leaving the path for the humans temporarily unmonitored. Elias signaled to Leela, and she led the prisoners through the corridor toward freedom. The humans moved quickly, guided by her voice and gestures. Their fear was palpable, but so was their determination. They were no longer captives. They were active participants in their own rescue, proving that human courage could overcome even the most advanced alien technology. Elias followed closely behind, ensuring that no one was left behind. The Zalker guards realized the deception too late. Alarms blared, and they began pursuing the humans, but the path had been secured. Leela's leadership and the team's planning kept them just ahead of their pursuers. As they reached the outer edge of the compound, a final obstacle awaited, a high gate reinforced with energy shielding. Elias examined it, knowing it would take ingenuity to bypass. Using knowledge gathered from previous patrols and his team's hacking devices, he managed to disable the shield temporarily. The gate hissed open, revealing the open sky beyond. Freedom was moments away. The humans rushed through, their feet pounding against metal and concrete. The wind of the outside air was intoxicating after months of confinement. Leela ran beside her father, her eyes bright with relief and determination. Elias held her hand tightly, never letting go. They had survived, but the danger was not entirely over. The Zalker would not let their captives escape without a fight. Behind them, the fortress erupted in chaos. Aliens shouted commands, and automated systems attempted to seal exits. Sparks flew, energy beams cut through the air, but the humans pressed on, moving faster than fear, guided by hope and determination. Every step brought them closer to safety, every moment a testament to human resilience. Finally, they reached a safe distance from the fortress. The Zalker could still fire from a distance, but the immediate threat had passed. Elias and Leela stopped briefly, catching their breath. Around them, the prisoners looked dazed but alive. They had survived the impossible, guided by human ingenuity and courage. Elias looked at Leela, seeing the strength and maturity she had gained during her captivity. She had endured horrors he could barely imagine, yet she had emerged as a leader, a beacon of hope for the others. His heart swelled with pride and relief. He whispered, "You did it." "We all did it. You're safe now." Leela nodded, her eyes shining. "We're not out of danger yet," she said, her voice steady. "But we can survive. We have to." Elias smiled. She had learned well, but more importantly, she had retained her humanity. That was the greatest victory of all. The human spirit, their courage, and their resilience had not been broken. They had endured and triumphed, even in the hands of an enemy that had underestimated them. The group moved further from the fortress, seeking a hidden location where they could regroup and plan their next steps. Elias knew the war was far from over, but this victory was crucial. It proved that humans could resist, adapt, and overcome. And it showed that even in the darkest moments, hope and courage could light the path to survival. As they settled into a temporary safe zone, Elias looked at the survivors. They were battered, exhausted, and scarred, but they were alive. They were human, and that was enough. He turned to Leela and smiled. She had led them, inspired them, and proved that the human spirit could not be conquered. Elias knew the coming days would be difficult. The Zalker would regroup, and the humans would face new challenges. But he also knew that as long as they had courage, ingenuity, and determination, they could endure. They had survived the impossible, and that survival was proof of humanity's strength. For now, they were safe. And that safety, however temporary, was a victory worth celebrating. The night air was cold as Elias led the group through the deserted outskirts of the Zalker fortress. The ruins of the alien technology glowed faintly in the darkness, casting long shadows across the cracked terrain. Leela ran beside her father, her movements precise, her mind focused. The prisoners followed, their faces reflecting relief, exhaustion, and a renewed sense of hope. For the first time in months, they were moving as free humans, no longer under alien control. But freedom was not guaranteed. The Zalker commander had been alerted to the disturbances inside the fortress, and reinforcements would soon arrive. Elias knew that the escape was only the beginning. To survive fully, they had to neutralize the commander or at least avoid his wrath until they could reach safety. Every decision from this point forward required careful thought, courage, and human ingenuity. He stopped briefly behind a cluster of rock formations, signaling the group to pause. He crouched, examining the path ahead. The open plains before them were exposed, and any attempt to rush through risked attracting the Zalker patrols. Elias needed a plan that balanced speed with strategy. "Leela," he whispered, "we have to work together now. I will create a diversion. You lead the prisoners through the safe path. Trust yourself. Trust them." She nodded without hesitation. Her eyes were steady, and her movements showed a maturity beyond her years. Leela had been forged in adversity, and now she carried the weight of leadership with confidence. Elias squeezed her hand briefly, then moved toward the high ridge overlooking the plains. From his vantage point, he could see the Zalker forces mobilizing in the distance. Their weapons glowed, their patrols quickened, and their drones hovered in search patterns. Elias studied their movements, calculating the timing and angles he would need to create a successful diversion. He adjusted small devices on the ridge, setting a chain reaction that would disrupt the enemy's sensors and attract their attention. "Go," he whispered to Leela. She nodded, signaling the prisoners to follow her lead. They moved swiftly, using natural cover, craters, broken machinery, and rock formations. Every step required precision, but Leela had become a guide, showing them how to navigate dangers while maintaining speed. Elias watched for a moment, ensuring they remained on course. Then he triggered the devices. Sparks flew, a sudden flare of light erupted, and a series of controlled explosions sent shockwaves across the plains. The Zalker forces reacted immediately, focusing their attention on the source of the chaos. Drones shifted positions, guards turned, and automated weapons recalibrated to target the disruption. Elias used the moment to retreat, moving toward the path Leela had created for the prisoners. They were still exposed, But the aliens' attention was diverted enough to give them a head start. The tension was unbearable, every second carrying the weight of potential failure. Suddenly, a group of Zalker soldiers broke from the main formation, moving directly toward them. Elias assessed quickly. He could not let them intercept the escape. Using his knowledge of the terrain, he led the soldiers into a narrow canyon, where their numbers and advanced weapons were less effective. The canyon's walls created natural choke points, allowing him to use guerrilla tactics. He and his team used small explosions, debris, and clever maneuvers to slow the aliens. Leela continued leading the prisoners, guiding them past the danger zone. Their cooperation was seamless, a perfect demonstration of human ingenuity and resourcefulness. Every human mind, every quick decision, every act of courage contributed to the success of the escape. The Zalker commander appeared then, towering above his soldiers. His glowing eyes scanned the area, focusing on the humans making their escape. Elias felt a chill but did not falter. The final confrontation was inevitable. He knew that neutralizing or evading the commander was essential for survival. He turned briefly to Leela. "Keep moving, I will handle this. Lead the others." She nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. The prisoners pressed on, following her confidently. They were no longer just survivors, they were active participants in their liberation, guided by courage, intelligence, and trust. Elias faced the commander. The alien's voice was a series of clicks and hums, impossible to understand, yet commanding and authoritative. The commander raised his weapon, and energy began to crackle at the tip. Elias took a deep breath, relying on his training and experience. He could not match the Zalker's raw power directly, but he could outthink them, use the environment, and exploit their weaknesses. He moved quickly, using debris and terrain as cover, drawing the commander into a narrow ravine. The alien, larger and stronger, followed, confident in his superior technology. Elias led him through a series of twists and turns, using small devices to create obstacles and distractions. Rocks fell, sparks flew, and the commander's attention divided between pursuing Elias and avoiding hazards. Elias remembered Leela's words from earlier, her voice steady despite fear. "We survive because we think, because we adapt." He repeated that in his mind, focusing on strategy over strength. He baited the commander into a trap, a concealed pit covered with debris and reinforced with metal plates. As the alien stepped forward, the pit gave way. The commander fell, momentarily trapped. Elias did not celebrate. He used the moment to retreat and rejoin Leela and the prisoners. They continued toward a hidden exit Elias had scouted earlier. The plains stretched before them, illuminated faintly by the moon and distant fires from the fortress. The humans pressed on, guided by Leela, their energy renewed by hope and determination. Every step forward was a victory against fear and oppression. Finally, they reached a temporary shelter, an abandoned human outpost far from the fortress. The prisoners collapsed in exhaustion, some injured but all alive. Elias looked around at the group, feeling a surge of pride. They had survived the impossible, outsmarted a technologically superior enemy, and reclaimed their freedom. He turned to Leela. She was tired, but her eyes shone with determination. "We made it," he said, his voice filled with relief. "We did," she replied, "because we worked together, because we didn't give up." Elias smiled, seeing the truth in her words. Humanity's strength lay not in weapons or technology, but in resilience, intelligence, and the willingness to fight for one another. The father-daughter bond, forged in loss and strengthened in adversity, had become a symbol of that strength. As the group settled into the outpost, Elias and Leela took a moment to reflect. They were safe for now, but the war was not over. The Zalker would regroup, and humans would face new challenges. Yet the victory they had achieved proved something vital. Humans could endure, adapt, and triumph even against the most advanced and ruthless foes. Elias reached out, holding Leela's hand. "You've grown into someone remarkable," he said softly. "I'm proud of you more than I can say." Leela smiled faintly, exhaustion etched on her face. "I learned from the best," she replied. "From you." For a moment they allowed themselves to savor the victory. The world was broken, yes, but it was not lost. Humans were still here, still fighting, and still capable of incredible courage and ingenuity. The bond between father and daughter, the trust and leadership she had shown, and the resilience of the prisoners all demonstrated that humanity's spirit could not be extinguished. Elias knew that the future would be challenging, that the war would continue, and that sacrifices would be required. But he also knew this. As long as humans held onto courage, hope, and the willingness to fight for one another, they could overcome anything. These Alker might be powerful, but human spirit was stronger. He looked around at the group one last time that night. Each face told a story of survival, determination, and resilience. Each human present had contributed to the escape and survival. Together they had turned fear into action, weakness into strength, and despair into hope. Elias turned to Leela once more. "We've survived the impossible, and we will keep surviving together." Leela nodded. "Together," she echoed. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting golden hues across the ruined landscape. The Zalker fortress glimmered in the distance, a reminder of the battle they had survived. But beyond it lay open skies, new paths, and a chance to rebuild. The humans moved forward, step by step, guided by courage, intelligence, and the unbreakable bonds of family and community. For Elias and Leela, this journey marked the beginning of something new. They had faced unimaginable odds, survived, and reclaimed their humanity. They had proven that even in the darkest times, hope could guide them, courage could protect them, and human ingenuity could triumph over any adversary. And as they walked into the rising sun, together with the others, Elias felt a profound truth settle within him. Humanity was not just a species that survived. It was a species that thrived, that adapted, and that could overcome any challenge. The Zalker might return, the war might rage on, but the spirit of humans, embodied in every act of courage and every bond of trust, could never be broken. Elias squeezed Leela's hand once more, and she smiled, understanding everything without words. They had survived, and they would continue to survive. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Humanity, against all odds, had won the first battle.